Did you know that from 1970s to 2000, there was a serious drought of black dramas on TV? In spite of that, there were plenty of black TV shows during this time, but nearly every last one of them was a comedy. Why do you think this was the case? It was a time before cable TV ruled the living room, before streaming services transformed binge watching into an art form. Back when we didn't have an app for everything, a time when there were only 3 major TV networks: CBS, NBC, and ABC, the Big Three, or the golden age of television. It was these networks that controlled images, shaped perceptions, and cultural awareness when most of the country was still segregated. It was common for people to rely on television shows to gain insight into the lives of others, particularly those from different cultures or backgrounds. This often led to a lack of accurate representation and limited exposure to diverse perspectives and stories to one-dimensional characters. Prior to the 1970s, most Americans did not know the networks had unwritten rules and codes in place for black people. These rules were utilized to an extreme extent in order to control and manipulate the portrayal of black people on television. Rules like always depict black men in stereotypical comedic roles, engaging in behaviors such as shucking and jiving. One TV show, Amos and Andy, started off with 2 white actors in blackface portraying black characters.
If I blue, if I blue, tell everybody around the place I is blue.
Get away from that phone.
All right.
This is the Fresh Air Taxi Cab Company of America Incorporated.
And even once the black actors took over, they were depicted as ignorant, shiftless, and comically inept. Another sitcom was centered around a black maid named Beulah. It also started off as a white actress in blackface. But then Hattie McDaniel took over, and she embodied the mammy stereotype, presenting a subservient image of a black woman. Then, in 1965, NBC released a show called I Spy. This series broke new ground by featuring a black actor, Bill Cosby, in a leading role for a drama. This seemed like progress, right? Somewhat, even though Bill Cosby played this dramatic role, he was widely recognized as a comedian. Another rule was to not portray a complete black family unit, with a black dad, a black mom, and little ones all together, unless it was a slave production. Hollywood received a lot of backlash for not portraying black people in a family structure similar to shows like Father Knows Best and Leave It to Beaver. In response to this criticism, NBC produced a television drama called Julia, starring Diane Carroll as Julia Baker, a widowed nurse raising her young son. The show was a step forward in featuring a black female lead in a drama. However, Julia perpetuated the stereotype that black single mothers are self-sufficient and do not need a black man to thrive. This was at a time when black families had an 83% intact rate, so it raises questions. What was the purpose of sending images of a single black mother? That is a question only the networks can answer. Another television show that started in the late 1960s was Room 222, which featured a diverse cast including 2 black actors in prominent educational roles. The show tackled serious topics such as race relations, women's rights, and harassment through a comedic drama lens. While primarily categorized as a comedy, it rarely explored the family dynamics of its black lead characters. After the 1970s, the representation of black people on television began to improve with the emergence of more TV shows. And many of these shows were great, with great actors and actresses. However, a conspicuous trend emerged, with the majority of these shows being comedic in nature. While this may have been enjoyable for the audience, it was ultimately indicative of Hollywood's adherence to certain unwritten rules and codes. For years, networks justified their programming choices based on ratings and profits. However, at the core of these decisions was a desire to control the images of black people. Looking back at some of the notable shows after the 1970s, you will see some things have improved, but others have remained the same. In 1970, NBC introduced The Flip Wilson Show to start off the decade. A trailblazing black man who rocked a dress like nobody's business. He'd magically morph into the lovable woman named Geraldine and do some hilarious sketches.
Monty K. Supermarket, Geraldine speaking. Oh, how you doing, killer? Yeah, they got me working at the checkout counter. You better stop that. I checked you out a long time ago. Yeah.
This is funny because this has become a sore thumb in Hollywood's repertoire. A black man in a dress. Then came the first black family on television. Good Times was a comedy where the Evans family struggled to make ends meet. They lived in a stereotypical ghetto in the projects on the south side of Chicago, which at the time only a small percent of black Americans actually lived in public housing. The acting and the family dynamics were great on the show. Although most of the culture controllers, the producers, the directors, and the writers weren't black, including David Letterman, for some reason they made the skinny bumbling JJ the star.
You got the number right, because you are talking to kid a dynamite! 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 Pure dynamite! Dynamite! It's so sexy they almost turned me off.
I wonder how all the other great actors on the show felt watching Kid Dynamite blow up. Another great show, The Jeffersons, where George and Wheezy moved on up to the east side. They had one son who was grown and rarely around, so you didn't see a lot of family dynamics playing out. However, the show featured the character of Florence, a beloved and sassy maid portrayed by Marla Gibbs.
It's none of our business.
If I was you, I'd listen to my wife. When it comes to brains in this family, you outvoted. 1-0.
Whose performance was so exceptional that it inspired a trend in Hollywood to include a sassy black female character in many other black shows. Or was this just another stereotype Hollywood wanted to create? Another great show with great performances was Sanford and Son, where Fred and Lamont ran a junkyard in the hood. Fred was a single parent to a grown man living at home with no job or family of his own. But there was family dynamics included. Fred and the sassy Aunt Esther traded insults like nobody's business.
When I was born, my body was blessed by Mother Nature, honey.
And as you got older, it was cursed by Father Time.
Red Fox playing Fred was so funny. He would have been funny playing any role: a police chief, a business owner of a janitorial service in a nice clean building with no junk. But once again, the culture controllers wanted to send the message that best fit their agenda. Additionally, other shows that featured black people during the 70s decade was What's Happening, was another show about a black single mother raising her family all by herself. And once again, it was during a time where black families were still intact. The only show that featured young black kids growing up in a non-hood environment was Different Strokes, which had 2 young black kids who were adopted by a rich white man. It should be noted that all these shows mentioned offered a wealth of content beyond what has been previously discussed. But at its core, all the notable black shows of that decade were not only all comedies, the majority of them took place in a lower socioeconomic urban setting. Despite the fact that black people lived normal lives in suburbs, rural areas, and regular working-class communities. A matter of fact, the only instance in which a drama featured a predominantly black cast was during the miniseries, Roots. Yes, the first time Americans got to see a whole cast of black dramatic actors and actresses came from a show centered around the theme of slavery. So up until this point, 99% of the black images on television were comedy, slavery, or poverty. It is important to note that the majority of the poor Americans at the time were white. This is so crucial because this set the tone for the entertainment industry and cemented the negative images and stereotypes forever, to the point when the networks tried to present different images, it didn't have much impact because they didn't seem real. One show in particular many Americans watched was The Cosby Show, a professional black family with both parents in the house, raising their young kids. The father was a doctor played by Bill Cosby, and the mother was a lawyer. The show did their best to change the narrative. But, let's face it, the aftermath of decades of stereotypes left some skeptical about the show's realism. Other popular 1980s shows included A Different World, a Cosby spin-off, Benson, Amen, 227, Family Matters, Gimme a Break, and Webster. These shows boasted excellent acting and were well received by audiences. However, it is worth noting that they were still limited by the unwritten rules of the entertainment industry at the time. Black comedies only. In the 1990s, NBC broadcasted The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, a sitcom featuring a black family living in the affluent neighborhood of Bel-Air. Despite the show's upscale setting, the writers included elements of poverty to the main character, Will Smith, who hailed from the rough streets of Philadelphia. The characters of Hillary and Carlton were written to provide comic relief by acting against the typical expectations associated with their race and socioeconomic status. As you can see, an increase in television shows that portray positive representations of black individuals, and many of these shows had a willingness to address serious issues. But that's not the point. The main concern being addressed is the lack of dramatic television shows featuring black individuals up until this point. During the 1990s, the television broadcasting landscape underwent significant changes with the emergence of a new player, the Fox Broadcasting Company, also known as Fox. Although it was founded in 1986, it wasn't until the 1990s that Fox became a major player and the fourth major broadcast network in the United States, joining ABC, CBS, and NBC. Many people believed that this would bring about significant changes in the industry. Fox quickly gained prominence with the success of shows like The Simpsons, Married and with Children, and Beverly Hills 90210, and the black shows on Fox were good. In Living Color, Martin, and Living Single were bold, dynamic, and impactful. Fox aired a police drama series called New York Undercover, featuring two detectives. This groundbreaking show was typical of the networks to only cast black dramatic actors in leading roles in crime dramas, as was seen in the 1984 TV show Miami Vice. The shows on Fox served as an inspiration for emerging networks like UPN, the WB, and CW. However, some new networks adopted questionable tactics by using black comedy shows to establish their channel and fan base, only to discontinue them once they had served their purpose. Some of these shows include Moesha, Steve Harvey Show, Girlfriends, The Jamie Foxx Show, The Wayans Brothers, Sister, The Hewleys, The Parkers, Half and Half, Everybody Hates Chris, The Bernie Mac Show, and others. Based on the information provided, it is clear that, over the years, there has been progress on network television with many black shows, but there is a significant fact that cannot be ignored. From the 1970s to the 2000s, the vast majority of black TV shows were almost exclusively comedies. The only black drama created up until this point with a predominantly black cast was a show called Soul Food. However, it was aired on the cable network Showtime. Years following that show, television networks began producing dramas featuring African American characters. However, these shows were not focused on family dynamics like Soul Food. Shows like The Wire, Empire, Power, BMF, and Snowfall have emerged. However, all centered around the stereotypical entertainment industry or black crime. We'll break down those shows in another video. In conclusion, the actors and actresses on all these shows we discussed should be recognized for their great performances. But the focus here is on the decision makers, the culture controllers, who have been in charge of the entertainment industry from the beginning. They have established unwritten rules for how black individuals are represented on screen. The decision to ensure that the majority of black TV shows were comedies wasn't done solely because comedy has the ability to address serious issues in a lighthearted manner. It was done to depict black individuals as being distinct from regular people and to perpetuate the idea that the majority of Black people come from impoverished and crime-ridden areas, and they're only useful for entertainment or comedic purposes. Thank you for watching, and please subscribe.